Hey, this is the Coach Ed Podcast. I am Ed Weefolder. You can track me down at strengthfitnessandspeed.com. Hello, here we go again. John Blackburn back in action with us. He's full of questions for us. John, welcome back, man. Last episode was great.
Yeah, thank you.
You're very welcome, sir. So what do we have on our plate today?
Cool. So I was hoping today we could focus on like a little bit more of like change of direction type of training that we do down here and how that incorporates with some of the reaction time training that we do and how those kind of play along with each other.
Sure. That sounds awesome, man. I guess, after that assessment, we get a feel for how well an athlete stops and starts. And it's a lot of it is, it sounds strange, but it's like just your ability to stop, your ability to absorb all that energy and redirect. And, a large part of that is, a lot of recruitment as far as like glutes, hamstrings, hips. What's going on during that is you've got like a strong eccentric contraction of your hamstring is going on. And we incorporate a lot of strength work along those lines. But that is, it's kind of like a strange thing to drill. I mean, you can practice stopping and starting, cone drills, etc., and that'll get you so far. But you sometimes got to get down to the root of the problem. What's your angle at your ankle? Is it still have some degree of dorsiflexion when it hits the ground? You can have a little bit of ball to heel during that point in time, and just good knee alignment, good hips. But at the root of that is a bunch of that strength, like a very, very good base of strength. So that's kind of like foundationally something that's super important behind all of the stop and start drills that we might do here. Super important.
Do you think training, like in terms of weight training, if you do like for a squat example, do like really slow on the way down and then explode on the way up?
Yeah, I mean that's a huge part of it. Almost even more so. I like a nice, slow, controlled eccentric. I love that bottom position of the squat. Everything stays nice and tight, and that kind of guarantees you better recruit hammies and glutes on the way back up. You really have no choice. So I love that as a big part of. Doesn't seem like it'll be an agility exercise, but it sure is.
Yeah, it kind of seems like a lot of like stop and go, at least for straight ahead movements, is really hip oriented and like kind of posterior chain.
Mm-hmm.
How do you think like more accessory type of workout or lifts or any type of accessory work plays along into that?
Yeah, definitely. Like I love RDLs for like the hip extension function. I love single leg RDLs. I also like dabbling. This would fall more into the accessory category of doing like a lateral lunge. You hook up a bungee to your hip. You anchor that bungee, and you walk away from the fixed end to build some tension in that bungee, and then you actually do your lateral lunge in the direction of the fixed end, and it kind of pulls you into that lateral lunge. So kind of indirectly simulating some momentum there. You're still doing the eccentric contraction of the hamstring going on in that direction. It's under a load, so it's almost like the same thing that would happen when you're cutting. So I like that as an accessory move for sure.
Yeah, that kind of goes into my next topic. So obviously you can change directions front and back, but how do you think weight training applies to, say, running straight ahead and like if you're like a running back or something, for example, making like a lateral cut or any type of lateral movement along with those?
Yeah, it's again a lot of the hip involvement again, and if you're lucky enough to get an edge and it's off to the races down the sideline, I mean you're approaching top end speed there. If you're lucky enough to run 50 or 60 yards, that is such a strong. The RDL plays a strong role in that movement. That's a big hip extension job, and a big function of the strength part of the power that happens out at that top end speed. So, yeah, it's super important. It's also the best ability is availability factor, and sometimes you just can't get away from having nice, functionally thick ligaments, tendons in your knee, and that equals years of gradual increasing poundages of squats and deadlifts and things like that. So it all kind of comes into play.
Yeah, I know we talked about squats and RDLs for kind of like straight ahead stop and go What do you think is like the equivalent like strength movement for lateral movements, or do you think it's still just basic squats, deadlifts,
I think it's
RDLs?
I think it still applies. Um, I think just teaching yourself to deal with that lateral stress a little bit. I love the lateral squat for that. Lateral lunge. Uh, they kind of fall into that category. It's more of a like a functional movement versus something that's more non-specific. But I think again, you can't get away from like a squat and deadlift to assist in your lateral movement as well.
Sweet. Let's talk about like some of the like actual like lateral and change of direction training that we do down here. Maybe like some of your like maybe like top three or like some that you think are like most effective or whatever you think.
Yeah, I like the I like all the change of direction, all the lateral movement workouts that I run. We usually start out with something very basic like a lateral march, and then we'll progress a lateral march up to like a loaded lateral march, whether it's an internal or an external load. Then a little bit of hopping laterally. It just kind of gets everyone in the mode to maybe a little less knee, a little less ankle, and a little more hip involvement in that lateral movement. But at that point, then it just becomes a matter of what kind of uh, somewhat sports similar movements you can get into. Like if we're working with some running backs here and such, um, we'll maybe have them deal with a med ball load at the beginning. We'll have them, maybe a couple steps in, they're going to have to react to either a defender out in front or a cone out in front. They're going to have to make a cut or a move. So usually those types of things we can kind of make them sports similar when you get into stop starts and things like that.
Yeah. A lot of the times, some of the guys we work with don't always play the same exact sports or same positions. So how does choosing a plan for either the day or the week or even like the summer, how does those like different positions affect how exactly you want to train certain movements?
Yeah, I mean, more often than not, we'll have a lot of sports similar athletes in the same group. So for instance, there's a lot of crossover. Like if you've got like a basketball player working on his lateral movement, uh, and you've got a cornerback. I mean, there's a lot of hip flip going on. There's a lot of lateral movement going on. So when we get our groups together down here, we kind of keep that in mind. Uh, More often than not, like linemen tend to flock together, so we'll work with O linemen and D linemen together. A lot of kind of similar moves there, but you know, there's overlap in sports and positions where we might have multi sports in the same group. Just depends on the theme of the day.
Sweet. So I think a lot like the big reason that we even need to change direction for any type of reason in sport is because of another stimulus or something that's forcing us to react to that. So how do you incorporate some like reaction type training along with that actual change of direction?
100%. It used to be where that was almost like a 50-50 balance here, John. Now it's like once we're comfortable with our ground mechanics, once we're comfortable with an athlete's stability, almost all of the lateral movement, change of direction workouts are uh, using open drills. In other words, the athlete's got to react to something, be it verbal, like a yell, a go, be it a movement on an athlete or a movement from the coach, a cone color, a cone direction, a ball. All these things are super important. Years and years ago, uh, Australia actually, I think 20 or 30 years ago, was a big proponent of this type of training. They really, really did a lot of research on it. And don't quote me on Australia. I think it was Australia, but it started to push and more in that direction of having to react to something. Otherwise, you end up being like ready, set, go fast, and that's okay if you're a track athlete waiting for the sound of the gun. But no sport is really set up that way, so we train that accordingly.
You think training both like visual reactions and like auditory reactions, do you think they play like into each other, or do you think they kind of have like a different response in terms of getting what muscle you want to fire to actually fire?
I think it's very different actually. That's why we kind of blend all of it. I mean, obviously, certain positions in football, uh, one side is more verbal, the other side is a little less verbal, more of like reading than reacting. But I think they're pretty distinct. Actually, they're trained have pretty different stimulus going on there.
Do you think like reaction training on the weight training side of things, like maybe giving like a press command or like something like that would affect reaction
I
training
would
with
certainly say
weight
that wouldn't hurt.
softness?
I mean, that's something that's especially if it's unpredictable. Like if you're not having to wait for, like, for example, in a powerlifting competition, as soon as that bar gets pretty still on your chest, you're going to get the press command. Well,
Mm,
if you varied the command, you could drive a
right.
presser, you could drive him nuts. But at the same time, I think that has value for sure.
More so on like the athletic side of things. Sorry.
Yeah, yeah, for sure, absolutely, for sure.
That's all I've got today. I'm trying to think. I mean, I kind of
John,
feel like these topics kind of interlap with each other so much. It's
yeah,
kind of
for sure.
almost hard to like keep expanding so much
No,
on
no,
it because
yeah,
I think,
absolutely. It's nice because you got my wheels spinning again a little bit.
yeah,
You actually gave me some ideas for the weight room. I hadn't really thought about that very much, but that's a way to kind of torture an athlete. It's a way to actually get them to react too. So yeah, I think we may start working some of that stuff in. It's a great
we'll
idea,
see.
man. John, I appreciate you being here today, man. You got my wheels spinning, and it was a very productive talk. And I really appreciate having you on.
Thank you. Appreciate being on.